Welcome to the Commissioner's Corner. What ended up being the week of the wide receiver, as 13 of the top 15 position players this week were wide receivers. And that being said, it was not a very competitive week for our fantasy group. Only one matchup within 10 points, and half of our matchups were decided by over 50 points. Stomps everywhere. First up, we have the Commissioner Bowl 2022, and this looked like it might be a close matchup heading into Monday Night Football, but after a huge outburst by Stephon Diggs and Miles Sanders just putting up 10 points, it ended up being one of those stomps. I got a little salt last week from an unnamed source about referring to this as my team. So I will say that our team is going to need to still fill some holes, and there are no immediate remedies present on the bench here to save us. As for Ryan, we talked about a lot of big wide receiver performances, but his big two, Chase and Adams, were not included in that list, and it was a pretty underwhelming week for him overall. Next up, we have one of the semi-competitive matchups as Chase takes down Crikey here. This one seemed semi-competitive because Lamar Jackson scored 42 points. And even with that, they only managed 110 overall. Chase, on the other hand, moved on pretty quickly from that Dak injury behind fantasy god and number 4 overall quarterback Carson Wentz leading the way. He also mitigated the Lamar Jackson points well by having Baltimore receiver and tight end that also benefited from the big day. Next up, we're going to play a little bit of Jeopardy here. Answer is Tim beating Skip in fantasy football. Ooh, what is something I never thought I'd say in my life? Not only that, we have the high score of the week out of Tim, the low score of the week out of Skip, and the stomp of the week. This is back-to-back stomp of the weeks for Skip, which is truly unprecedented. This could have been a close matchup if Tim just started Jalen Hurts and Tyreek Hill, in which Skip would have squeaked out a half-point victory in that scenario, but Tim did start a full roster and won by 75 points instead. Here we had a fairly close matchup that looked like it might come down to Monday Night Football as Paul takes down Lou, but Josh Allen had a big game on Monday night and Dalvin Cook did pretty much nothing, leading to an over 20-point victory. Pretty standard game here. Few players did well on each team, but the big thing we need to look at is Amari Cooper's usage here. He had 3 points in week 1 in the starting lineup, and then Paul benched him for week 2, in which he had 20 points. What will he do for week 3? Good luck, Paul. In our closest matchup of the week, Zach takes down Jeff to get his first win of the season, mostly on the back of Amon-Ra St. Brown, who looks like a legitimate top 10 wide receiver so far. Jeff himself had the top scoring running back of the week as Nick Chubb put over 30 points, but team fell a bit short as Russell Wilson had a fairly weak performance. Last up, a brutal week for the Skipper household as Brittany loses to Brian here. If you combined Brittany and Skipper's points, they still would have lost to Tim. That with the Trey Lance injury, Brittany's going to need to scramble a bit to come back from this 0-2 hole she's in. As for Brian, went from the second lowest score last week to the second highest score this week on big performances from Aaron Jones and Jalen Waddle. He also had 2 0-point players in his lineup and still scored 142 points. And that's with 2 starting running backs on his bench that scored 15 points themselves. How does he have this much depth? Well, that's it for week 2. Other than Brian, bench depth is lacking. The waiver wire is barren. Times are bleak. Good luck out there, everybody. I'll see you next week on the Commissioner's Corner.